If you've been on early internet, and I'm talking early, back when it used to make beeping sounds when you tried to log on, maybe during AOL times, you probably come across some early internet prophets, okay? And I know I certainly did. There's quite a few, but I'd say the most infamous of them all, and if you're even somewhat into the paranormal community, maybe something a little bit more outside the normal boundaries of, let's say, studied phenomena, you've had to have heard of John Titor back in the day. I never even read too much into him, but just from hanging out on the GameFAQs paranormal conspiracy message boards, Godlike Productions, and Above Top Secret, I heard of John Titor. And
dude, I hung out on like the most normie of normie sites until 2013. And even then, I still somehow heard about John Titor as well. So it's like, he really was like, out of all the old school prophets, he really was like the most prominent one. It's unreal that so many people heard of him.
You know why? This is part of the reason. It's just to give some context. This was in the early 2000s. We're talking post 9/11. And something that happened around that time that's important is The Matrix came out. And there was a lot of simultaneous optimism and dread about the speed at which we were technologically advancing as a society. And I mean, some of those dreads, were seen to not be baseless. I think that there are some social issues that's caused by these advancements. I don't think they're quite to the scale that John Titor predicted that we're going into now, but people were putting a lot of thought into the technology we were using every day and how it was affecting our lives. And when you had someone like this come along at a time where, I'm not going to say information wasn't freely available, it was harder to get to. Okay, people, it wasn't this, information wasn't as easily accessible as it is now. As I said, you needed to punch in a password and wait about 15 minutes before you could even use the internet. And then websites loaded at, at snail's pace.
That's a really good point. The 1999 to like 2001, before 9/11, that was the tail end of time. That was the tail end of the age at which you could say something not true and have it go viral for a long time. Like I remember like
there's no fact checking then.
Yeah, like people like used to think like really stupid stuff in the 50s, like eating uranium was cool or good for your health, and they would just think that for like 5 or 10 years,
long enough to pass it to their kids.
Yeah, they would just like spread these tales, or like, Sonny, uranium's actually good for your health. Like, they would just say like the most ridiculous, like factually correct things, and because they had no internet, they just couldn't check that. So I think before 9/11, that really was like the last possible time something like this could have gone viral.
No, exactly. It was at the tail end, like you're saying. So when you have someone that's making more it's redundant term, future-oriented predictions, but I mean future in the sense of technology adjacent to what was going on at the time, predictions, and he was scrying in a venue that was more catered to being technologically adept and just, capturing maybe on the fears of how the times were changing. And it ended up making him a bit of it propelled him into internet infamy. So, I'm sure there's plenty to say about John Titor and what he's done, who he is as a person. We're not getting into that. What we want to get into and kind of talk around are some of his predictions. So we got a list of 10 of them here, and I'll just start it off, okay? Because this one's kind of pertinent, especially under some recent events, but I don't want to be too obvious with those. But it said, number 1, civil war in the United States. Titor predicted the U.S. would experience a civil war starting in 2004, intensifying in 2008, and leading to a fragmented country with martial law. So I think this was kind of around the time where people were more fearful of obvious government overreach, maybe when you're getting put into camps, which would later, be capitalized upon with certain other conspiracy websites. I think we've found more of a control through contentment mechanism that's enacted by government and maybe large corporations, that's probably more effective than saying, hey, everyone, get into a camp right now. So, no, I don't think this prediction's come to fruition. But when you use the term civil war in the United States, what he was right about was we've never been more fractured as a country. I'm an American, and this is the most polarizing time I've ever lived in. It probably could have been before
if it was a
me.
typo, if you meant to type 2024 to 2028, it actually would be kind of pertinent, don't you think?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I do think so. I mean, you could argue we already went through some of that through the summer of 2020, 2021, because that was a strange time to be an American, especially in urban areas. But it's tough. I don't want to get into the vagaries of prediction. When they talk about Nostradamus, some of the predictions be like, 2 whales will rise from the, and it's like, oh, those 2 whales actually meant the Twin Towers and actually meant their fun. That's fine. I'm willing to let all of that go. That's why you can have fun with stuff like this. And it's better to say this literally didn't come true and more kind of talk around it, and maybe see if you can extrapolate something useful from that. So
it is
Civil
pretty
War
funny.
yeah.
It is pretty funny how with all these time travel predictions and time travel people, when people ask when's the next significant event going to happen, the answer is always oh, it's next week. It's a really close date. It's oh, okay, yeah, I guess we'll see really soon then.
Yeah, I have to give it to that one pastor of a cultish church in America where he said the world, Harold Camping, I think his name was, and he said, yeah, the world's going to end about 1.5 years from now. I'm like, good on him. He's a man of his word. He's going to be around to see it, and then when it doesn't happen, he can be like, my bad, at least he can own up to it. So now he ended up making an excuse for himself of why it didn't happen. So that about our collective consciousness, I don't know, it was ridiculous. So Civil War in the United States not happening. What's the next one? What we got?
So second one is kind of along the same lines, but it's World War III. So according to John Titor, World War III breaks out in 2015, sparked by conflicts involving Russia, America, and other nations. And supposedly this war results in massive destruction and the nuclear destruction of major cities around the world. And okay. You know what? Off the bat, I think John got the combatants right. It does seem like Russia and America, and perhaps the inclusion of China, will be the main combatants of a potential World War III. And going nuclear, that's an interesting prediction. Do you think the chance of going nuclear is real, or are we still under MAD? What do you think?
Maybe I've played too much Metal Gear, but I think that I don't know why a country would do that or use it in a way any other than through deterrence. I think the whole point of nuclear armaments to exist is to protect yourself through deterrence, and a country knows when they attack you with their nuclear missiles, you'll launch them back. And also, it generally makes most places that you nuke uninhabitable. So I don't think nuclear destruction will probably happen. But what I do think he's on the right track with here is World War III. It says World War III would break out in 2015, sparked by conflicts involving Russia, the U.S., and other nations. So when you're thinking about Ukraine, maybe to Taiwan to a lesser extent,
hold on,
Israel, Palestine. Yeah.
If you think about 2015, Russia did annex Ukraine or annex Crimea in 2015, and that could be seen as the start of Russia coming back into the Western media as the big bad guy. I don't think, because if you remember this, in 2012, during the Romney elections, the Romney-Obama elections, during the debate between Obama and Romney, Romney was talking about we have to militarize against Russia, and then the New York Times wrote this article against him saying does this guy think it's still 1980? Russia's not a threat anymore. Fast forward 3 years after Russia annexes Crimea, and they're back in the big bad category. So it's interesting to think about that.
Not to get overly political, but I'm starting to get old because I remember watching that debate live. Romney said verbatim, "Russia is our biggest geopolitical foe." And Obama said the Cold War called and they want their policy back. And it was supposed to be this amazing own of Romney that was reverberated through the ages. And then 4 or 5 years later, we had to hear how Russia was our biggest enemy from the political aisle that Obama's aligned with.
So Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly. So, but what I do think is that the stepping stones for a world war were certainly there starting in 2015, and maybe he's kind of talking about a slow build, and hey, I
You
don't
know,
think
I guess
yeah.
if you want to say like what was the seed that started the whole thing, maybe you could attribute it to 2015 in the future. If
Yeah,
things
I think
de-escalate.
that's not a bad one. So in the first one in Civil War, he could be right, but his timing was off. In this one, he could be wrong, but his timing was on. Maybe I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. So good for him. Good for him. That's not bad at all. So the next one we have here is the collapse of global order. This is a little broad. The aftermath of the war, which didn't happen yet. But will, I promise. I'm just kidding. I don't know. I'm not practicing myself. The
Fingers
aftermath
crossed.
of the yeah, the aftermath of war would lead to collapse of current global political and economic structures for warning. I like this ending part. Resulting in a more localized agrarian society.
Can I just say off the bat, that sounds amazing. I would love that.
I know.
I would freaking
Well,
love that.
I really hate to say this, and now that I'm reading these descriptions, it sounds like he may have read the fourth Dune book, where, not giving too much away, Paul Atreides' son, who becomes a sandworm himself, half sandworm, has to sacrifice parts of his body to create some type of global consciousness reawakening that would lead to war and famine that would scatter humanity. And in that scatter, little pockets of humanity would be ensured to always survive, because if one pocket got destroyed, there would always be another one somewhere that their enemies didn't know about. So it was really to preserve the entirety of humanity. And maybe this is something that he's hinting at. When you destroy global order, maybe we're becoming too centralized, too interconnected, and reliant on each other. We need to go back to local communities and being able to just survive on our own and have our own practices and traditions.
Decades,
Exactly. So, you know what? It's funny. I think a lot of this is coming from not optimism. I think he's hopeful. It's strange to sound that these events would happen, because I don't think he's like, oh yeah, it'll be terrible that there's nuclear destruction. He's like, actually, something really good will come out of this. We'll be a great agrarian society where we're more localized. We all have 15-minute cities. I'll tell you what, he predicted the advent of the 15-minute city. So maybe it could be that. Is that what they're called, the small ones, right? Where you can get anywhere within 15 minutes?
Yep,
15-minute
cities.
Sorry, not an urban planner.
I'm trying to think, if you combined modern tech, like consumer technology, with an agrarian society, life doesn't seem that bad. Like you go out, work the fields a little bit, plant some stuff, and then you got your cell phone, you got your TV, you got your PS5. I don't know. Things don't seem that bad, if you put it that way.
So funny, like you could go to farmers, be like, you guys can play PS5, right?
Yeah.
No, there would have to be a strict cultural contract that would say, this is our intent. Okay, we want to make it easy for you to eat, but we want to also preserve the importance of localized society. So you're allowed to be technologically driven, but you can't become interconnected with each other. That has to be intentional. So I guess Titor's saying maybe we can do it unintentional through global collapse.
This sounds like? This sounds like a society where infrastructure is set back hundreds of years, but personal technology remains the same way. Does this sort of make sense? Like infrastructure is what allows people to fly and really make the world a small place. Like, cities where they can house tens of millions of people. But if you set that back to the medieval ages, but you still retain technology, like personal digital technology, I think that's sort of what he's getting at here. And I'm trying to imagine that society right now. That does seem kind of sick. You're living in these medieval farmlands, but you have current day tech with you.
That's an incredible idea. So imagine all the technological advances we have now offline.
Yeah.
Offline. I like that. I think you're onto something. That's a good thought exercise, maybe, to do. So, all right, collapse of global order. That's interesting. So what we got? What's the next one?
Dude, this next one is the big enchilada. It's the huge technological leap of mankind, because John Titor claims that time travel technology will be discovered and utilized by the government in 2034.
He gave himself a big window for that one.
he mentions that technology will continue to evolve, but that there will be a period of regression between the wars and social upheavals. So off the bat, I don't know about this one. I mean, if I'm just going off like my current understanding of physics, I think the amount of energy that someone would need to even affect space-time, human species is going to be nowhere near that in 2034. But it also would be really funny if like the solution to time travel was like a really simple thing, like you just mix water with like iron. Like you just mix water with like fucking iron and it makes like a portal. It's like, oh, just like that. Okay, cool. That would be sick.
So I'm impressionable. I'm naive. I like seeing life through myth. I can believe in a lot of outlandish things, cryptids, ghosts, demons, aliens. I love it all. You'll never catch me with time travel. I don't think it's possible. I think even according to my faith that time needs to be immutable, but before you even get to that, time travel makes no sense to me. I remember one time when I was fighting with on above top secret message boards about 15 years ago with someone about how time travel isn't possible. And they had some shrouded demonic, avatar and like persona that they would give off where they typed very concisely and with proper grammar online that they knew everything and everyone was dumber than them. Everyone knows someone like this on a message board, by the way. And their name was, Muted Whisper Vampire X or something. And this person was trying to explain to me how time travel is very possible if you're able to manipulate tachyons, which I did not know at the time were theoretical in their existence alone. So they're like,
they're entirely fictional. So I love how he's just like, well, just use tachyons. It's like, oh, really? Just use tachyons. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, so I let that one go when I was younger. And then later I was like, no, wait, this is how petty of a person I am, by the way. 10 years later, I looked back at that thread. I was like, wait, what was this person talking about? Like, tachyons don't even exist. It makes no sense to me. It's like, let's put it this way. Dark matter is realer than a tachyon, right? So I don't even, and those are barely real. Those are mostly theoretical too. I mean, so are black holes at the end of the day. So, but I won't get too much into that. I might be speaking outside of school. But I can't buy that. Let's just say there was a freak incident that made John Titor a time traveler. I'm fine with that. I don't think we'll be able to produce in a lab for government use time travel. And then what do they do when they go back? Just walk around and be like, yep, I'm here. So what, they'll change past events without having no idea how that'll affect the future or the present time the people they just interacted with are in. Time travel is just messy. Just leave it to, by the way, any movie or show that's ever done it, there's always been some sort of paradox, or there's something that there's a suspension of belief that you need to have when watching a show or movie that has time travel. So that's something I'm willing to let go.
Did you hear about the LK99 superconductor a few months ago?
No.
Like the you know what like a superconductor, like a room temperature superconductor is, right? Where they have,
you could say it in layman's terms, because no, not really.
So the issue of like wiring and electrical circuits is that when you push a current through it, it has resistance and it loses charge over time. Basically, a room temperature superconductor is like a substance that is able to conduct an electrical charge, but has no friction and doesn't decrease the voltage of that charge at all. So it's like a wonder material for electrical circuits. And this team in South Korea a few months ago said that they made it. They made the world's first room temperature superconductor, and everyone was freaking out. They're like, "Oh my god, this is gonna change humanity!" But it turns out their thing was fake. But their claim,
like the aliens in Mexico.
Their claim was really interesting because they claimed that they made a room temperature superconductor, like this mythical material for electrical circuits, from copper, and they made copper in a really specific way, but that was all that was needed. And they got me thinking, like, it would be cool, like I mentioned before, if the secret to fucking time travel is just like something extremely simple, but it just done in like a really specific way. Like what if you just mixed like gold with water and you just spun it around in a circle and that made a portal?
Well, that's when you start getting into forbidden electronic technology. So when you talk about the electric car, or they had to silence Tesla because he wanted to make a tuning fork for the world, and it actually is pretty simple. It uses the natural waves that are in the air, and I like that. That's all. I mean, could it be a little mythical? It could, maybe, but I do think it's fun to think about it like that. So no, you could be onto something there. I want to look up that superconductor. That's interesting. Just to add on to that, though, with the technological advancements, the next point was CERN and time travel. We already talked about time travel, but I'm sorry. I don't like CERN pretending they aren't weird. Okay, where they're like, oh yeah, we did that ritual where we're all wearing hooded robes around a Vishnu goddess statue, whatever it may be. I could be off a little bit there. Semantics. We did that as a joke. It's like, haha, like, what do you want me to do? Think it's funny with you? You're weirdos. So, strange. I think what goes on with CERN is strange, and I think they've actually earned some of the reputation that's been given to them by some outskirts online. But we'll move on from CERN.
I think they're an easy scapegoat. I think they're just a bunch of like loser scientists that are trying to be their own Oppenheimer. Like I think they're so stupid that they're like, when we finally do crack some like mystery of the universe through the CERN, it'd be cool if we had this like statue of like this Indian god or whatever, and then we could say some cool quote from it that we all memorize. But
yeah, we're all part of the larger. I don't know, just some stupid.
I'll just put it this way: these people at CERN, they wish they could be in on some conspiracy, but they're too loserish to do that. So
yeah, that's a good point. I'm on board with that one. The next one on here. I like this a lot because I lived through it, which means, again, that I'm old. Titor suggested that the Y2K bug would have more serious consequences than it actually did. So, everyone got through the Y2K that New Year's, I remember, because everyone thought our computers would reset thinking it was 1900 instead of 2000 because they'd never been programmed to go past the year 1999 with the 2 digits at the end. And we were okay. We made it through that one, but the concept of the Y2K bug, I'm pretty nostalgic for that because it'll never happen again in my lifetime. I wish
it doesn't make any sense though, because like, the time changed. Okay, like, is that it? the date. I
don't know when they're tracking weather or financial data. That's where like a lot of the fear came from, or just operating machinery, and let's just say some machinery that thought it was a certain date suddenly thinks it's 1900, and I don't know, starts churning butter instead of, I don't know, doing something more technologically advanced. So I'm kidding about that part, but it is funny. It's just like the Y2K, it was actually really bad. You just don't know it yet. Yeah, we're good.
Also,
okay.
I love how he made this prediction.
That's a product of its time.
I love how he made this prediction after Y2K already happened, and like nothing. He just wanted to add more fuel to the nothing burger that Y2K had.
I think he was stuck in time on it. I think he's like, no, I actually like the concept of the Y2K bug, I want to keep piggybacking off of it. So, what else we got on here?
We have social changes. So
this is a good one,
kind of along the same lines that we talked about previously, but. John Titor predicted a shift towards more community-oriented lifestyles, with people living in smaller, self-sufficient communities. And he also mentions a change in societal values, focusing more on family and local community bonds. And you know what? I can kind of see this happening after any war that we're potentially leading up to happens, but not right now. Now it's too icky for that to happen. But after a war, absolutely this could happen. What do you think?
Well, we're defining ourselves through centralized beliefs now. I mean, even our beliefs have been commodified, and they're able to be used for, let's say, economic or political reasons. So a lot of what we have now, as far as the social stigma, is you're on one side or the other side. You're either the for side or the against side, especially given attempted assassinations of a president, a contentious upcoming election. So we're pretty entrenched into a larger parts of the whole. So this fracturing that Titor's talking about, it's not gonna come to fruition unless there's a much larger catalyst that's going to force us to think this way. And you hear about it sometimes too. And I like it. I think he's being optimistic. Again, this is less a prediction and more of an optimism that he's trying to kind of exercise on us. But I like it. And some people are starting to think that way. Okay. You know, when you hear someone say, focus on your local elections, focus on your neighbor. These are somewhat, not the election part, but the other part, these are kind of biblical concepts about local community and your neighbor and the people that are. So it's, I like it. I don't see it happening unless there's a major change in people's hearts and minds with the world around them. Because right now, and this kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier, people are focused on what's going on their screens miles away from where they're living. People get angry about what's going on miles and miles, and I mean that in a sense of long distance, what's going on their screens. So if we were able to kind of cut off that access, which is what he thinks will happen through war, you'll be a lot more focused on your next door neighbor.
That's kind of what I was going to add to. Like, you say it's a really optimistic lens towards what he looked at humanity ends up, and I'm thinking, you know, I don't think it's really that far reached if war actually does happen in the scale that he talked about. Imagine like a person today that's like really politicized, you know, someone that's like one of these Antifa people that like really hates. So person A is an Antifa person, and they really hate person B because person B is homophobic or transphobic or whatever. You put those two people through a large scale war event such as World War III, and watch how that desire to kill each other from person A to person B evaporates, because person A is like, well, yeah, Mark is homophobic, but you know, he saved my life when the war happened. So how much vitriol am I really supposed to have towards someone like that? You know?
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be something that brings a lot of more people closer to these community oriented lifestyles that John Titor talks about.
I think his predictions are balancing between being a technological hobbyist and a social theorist. So he has a lot of like fun, interesting thoughts about technology at the time and its implications, but he also has thoughts, which I think, through the opposite of some of them that are happening to this day from his predictions, he had some ideas of how he thinks society could maybe recover from the technological advances that we were starting to become privy to at this time. So it's kind of interesting because you get an idea of his worldview through these predictions and his fears, maybe, which I think is interesting. And maybe that's part of why they've stuck around a little bit. So we're going to fly through these last two. This one, I love, this is on the top 10 list. No Olympics in 2004. I will say, it is strange that there are world-shattering events that happen at the Olympics. I think it was, I don't know, it was Munich or whatever. There were some Israelis taken prisoner and executed by, I don't even know what the opposing faction was. But stuff does happen at the Olympics. It's a strange time. I mean, it's when you're gathering of, you know, all the world's talents and, you know, world superpowers together in one spot. So,
yeah.
But it said no Olympics in 2004. Well, actually, did we skip the Olympics because of COVID that one year?
We postponed it for a year.
Yeah, so maybe he was onto something through the scrying here. Maybe just he got his timing off a little bit. So yeah, he's not too far off on that one. That is interesting. And then the last one was Waco style events. He predicted more events similar to the Waco siege would occur in the U.S. as the civil unrest grew. I don't think we've had anything to the Waco level happen since Waco, and Ruby Ridge predates that. But
I think we could see more Waco style events going forward from where we are now.
1,000%, absolutely.
Like, dude, if the assassination of Trump actually did happen, absolutely there would have been some Waco style events. Absolutely, yeah. Dude.
I'll tell you what, there could be a complete manufactured Waco style events where it's federal agents shooting and killing unknowingly other federal agents who are on the other side inside of this militia cult. So I'd say that was a just completely like fictional veneer of a Waco style event. I could believe that. So, but yeah, more to come on that one. So there's the top 10 for Mr. Titor. You have any closing thoughts, Tyson?
I like where he's going, and I like, like you said, he does have a sort of like positive vision for humanity, and I really hope the more agrarian stuff that he mentions just comes true.
I like that.
That would be kind of sick. And this might be bad, and maybe I'm speaking from a privileged position because I live in an island that's like so far removed from the rest of the world, but it would be kind of sick to see World War III happen, just to see what would happen, and just to see things like really pop off and get moving.
Pop off. You want World War III for the pop off?
I feel like if World War III did happen, I could. It's gonna sound dumb, but it's like I want to witness something. I want to witness a really important part of history, and World War III that would tick the box.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm glad it could be a fulfilling experience for you. I am happy about that.
It's probably a lot worse for you, given where you're living. So,
I like this because I don't think, and it might be because of recency and the times that we're living in, we haven't had time to digest what our mind process was around this time. And I'm talking about the early 2000s, because it feels closer than it actually is. The early 2000s was more than 20 years ago. Okay.
Damn,
and we haven't been able to kind of hone in on what our fears were of the future, how we kind of navigated through everyday life, being exposed to new forms of technology. And when you talk about the Y2K bug, I forgot about that. So being able to look at someone who is trying to predict the future at this time period. I'm talking about the Matrix 9/11 time period. I'm not saying that as a conspiracy colloquial. I mean the literal movie, The Matrix, coming out, and 9/11, which I think that was probably the biggest media event to happen at that time in conjunction with 9/11. And I think it left a lasting impact through those two coming out so closely with each other, because what is said in the Matrix informs a lot of the ways that we've thought and acted since that point, or at least not in a predictive sense, but it just had such insane lasting impact when you talk about the red pill and the blue pill, and that's something we still do now. And to have 9/11 happen directly after that, it's just it's interesting. It's something that's interesting to think about. So it's nice to see someone that was so forward thinking at that time instead of stuck in the present. Okay, he says, well, what are the implications of all of this? And he was also thinking a little bit in the past. The Y2K bug, that's still going on. Like, what? I don't know. It's just interesting. And I hate to be a factualist about this, because what fun is sitting here and going, well, collapse of global order didn't happen yet, so he's wrong, and it's just stupid. It's not about him being wrong or right. It's about dissecting what he was thinking in the context of that time. And that's interesting to me. So I have fun with it.
Also, one more thing. I really do hope the thing he said about technological advancement, like how humans are going to rapidly progress their technology. I hope that does kind of come true, though. That would be really cool to see.
And you're thinking about more technological regression, because that's what he's saying. It's like, it's instead it's.
But can you
think about
imagine,
it this way? Yeah.
Can you imagine they actually do invent time travel in 2034? Like, dude, that would be so fucking sick.
And this is why I think time travel is stupid. Technically, they already did invent it in 2034. If they did, right? You would have seen a time traveler by now.
Right.
I don't know, which is this. It already creates a paradox in your brain, and that's why I don't think time travel is possible. It never will be. It's not meant to be.
Do you think forwards time travel is possible?
I think that might be a different subject for a different time, but no, I don't. And I can't make an informed decision. I just feel in my soul that time travel is not and should not be possible. So, apparently you think you can already into the future. But that's something for me to ponder over today. There we go.
There you go.
All right. That's good stuff. Much appreciated. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And we are The Scary Door.